Hello, I'm Brian, and if you're like me and you're curious about the Vego Garden 10 by 20 stackable seedling trays, today I'll be doing an unboxing and giving you my initial impressions about the product, and then also provide you with additional insights about whether this product can work for you as well. So on my right, I have a standard 10 by 20 72 cell tray that I use to propagate things like wheat, and this year I want to grow barley as well, so I'm looking forward to propagating some barley in these types of trays. So without further ado, let's get into this box. I reached out to Vego Garden and asked them if they would be willing to send some trays to us to evaluate and share with our audience. And more specifically, I was also curious about their stacking ability. So they sent a couple of trays with the ability to stack. These trays you can purchase as singles and multiples. So here we have a couple in this box, and here they are. When I looked at the product information and the pictures, it looked like a very robust plastic, and it is a very robust plastic. It might be overbuilt because it's super sturdy. Wow, you can barely flex this when you twist it. And then in the box you have some of the pillars or columns for stacking. So let's take everything out of this box and talk about this product a little bit more and my initial thoughts about it. Let's get this box out of the way. When it comes to seed trays like this that allows you to propagate or start seeds for lots of plants, the best use for them I've found is if you're starting one type of plant. And for things like wheat, we need a lot of plants. But for the average gardener, like myself, I prefer to use these smaller trays. That way we can have variety. And the problem with starting different types of plants in one mono tray is that you have different germination times and different maturation times. So if you started, say, like lettuce over here, and then you have something that takes longer to sprout, the lettuce is going to be here ready to go, and then it's just a little bit harder to work with. It's possible, but a lot harder. So these have very practical uses, and the best use I found, again, is if you're starting many of the same types of things, like for instance here, wheat. I'm looking at these trays, and one of the things that I like about the stackability, let's see how they do, is that when you start a lot of plants and you have lots of trays to move around, being able to move more than one tray at once is going to be very, very efficient. So that's not going to go anywhere. So that's a cool thing about the stacking ability. Here in Southern California, there's a transition period between winter and the start of spring where we can start our plants and have them outside, like in the greenhouse, but there's not enough daylight at the end of the day to sustain that growth. So we want to move it indoors. And again, to have lots of trays to move, that can be cumbersome. So that's the nice feature about the stacking ability of these trays. So let's take these trays apart and look at them individually. All right, let's move this off to the side here. The other thing I notice about the Vego trays is that it has these holes on the bottom that will let you pop out your seedlings more easily. And then they have these air pruning slits. So these holes on the bottom and the slits can be very useful for new gardeners. But for me as an experienced gardener, I think it might be a little bit of a liability. And I'll talk about why it's a liability in a second. So those are the slits. And then with the slits, let me just get into the liability right now. So with the slits, it helps with the pruning of the roots so that it doesn't get root bound your seedlings. But at the same time, it allows for the moisture to escape. So you're going to need, in addition to the cell tray itself, you're going to need these 10 by 20 deep trays. So you need to put this in there like that, so that the moisture's kept in there, so you don't have to worry about the root balls drying out. And the nice thing is that this thing fits into these 10 by 20 trays easily. I know that Vego Garden has these shallower trays that you can also purchase, but if you do that, keep in mind that you might need to keep an eye on the watering of your trays. And let me demonstrate for you the other thing about the contrast about these standard trays is with experience, you will know when is a good time to pull your plant out and keep the whole entire root ball intact. So it is possible at some point in your learning curve to get to a point where you can just plop these out without having to use the bottom hole. So that's one advantage of these standard traditional trays, is that over time, if you build that experience, you can pop these out pretty quickly. Whereas over here, you may need to come in and individually pop these out. So something to keep in mind. Very useful for new growers. Can be a handicap for experienced growers. But I like that these are solid. This is an investment for the life of this product. So this is going to stick around for a while. Whereas over here, we're probably going to be replacing it every 7 to 8 years because the plastic starts to crack and we're going to have issues. The other thing is, if you're using these trays, whether you're using a Vego Garden tray or the standard trays, you're going to want to fill this with a grow medium that's very light. And the grow medium that I use is Pro Mix or something similar to Pro Mix. So there's a company that makes Pro Mix, and I think they market it as Pro Mix, but there are copycat companies like Sunshine, so you can get an aggregate mix 30 at the big box store. I would recommend using that mix or something very light, because if you use garden soil, the garden soil is going to dry out. It's going to be really heavy, and you're going to have difficulty popping out these plants. So that's that. And then as far as my advice on seed starting, you're going to want to, as you grow your experience, you're going to want to keep an eye on how they pop out. So if you use these standard 72 cell trays, you can over time kind of gain experience and know when it's time to pop out these plants. You don't want them in here too long. Whether you're using this tray or this tray, you don't want your seedlings in the trays for too long, because it then creates problems. And that gets into the next part. Whether you're using this air pruning tray or another company's product where there's air pruning involved, that can be actually a bad habit forming convenience. And what I mean by that is, one of the principles of starting your seedlings is you want to get them in the garden at the ideal time. You don't want them to be inside a container for longer than necessary. With these traditional trays that do not do air pruning, once the plant gets root bound, you can see that. It's very visible, very tangible to you, and you know that you've waited too long to get these out. Whereas if you use a air pruning tray, it's less tangible because you may not notice the root pruning, and your plant is overly mature for that stage of transplanting. So that is the other key. So these can create bad habits. So that's something that you want to be really mindful as a newer gardener and you're starting your seedlings. But as an experienced gardener, I like that these are really robust. I like that we can stack them. And I have the experience of knowing when to take these out and get them into the next stage, either in the garden or potting up. So that's really, again, really crucial, making sure that the seedlings, when they sprout, you move them along the next stage. If you keep them in the container for too long, while the plant looks like it's okay and happy, once you put it out in the garden, eventually it's going to be susceptible to disease and pests. So that's all I can think of at the moment about this product. I'm really excited about using them. I'm going to be filling them up with some Pro Mix, and we're going to be planting barley. We have our wheat that's ready to be planted out in our garden. We're going to add barley to our plantings, and I hope to be able to actually eat that barley, whereas the wheat we grow as, for now, cover crop for compost material, and then also for treats for our chickens. So until we can find a way to husk out our wheat in an efficient manner, we're not going to make flour with them yet. But eventually, I think we will try to do that. Last thing, again, I want to come back to is with these air pruning trays, you're going to want to make sure that the moisture is not lost too quickly. So you will need to use these 10 by 20 trays, and a couple of sources that I use, Greenhouse Megastore and also Bootstrap Farmer. So when you're looking at places to shop, if you're like me, where you shop is going to be dependent on the overall costs. That includes shipping and whether you can also bundle in other products that you're going to need with that purchase at that time. So those are two vendors that I like to use. And if you're curious, these are Bootstrap Farmer 72 cell trays, and they are traditional, and I think they're still very functional. And these are probably going to be really fun to use because they're very sturdy. And I like that with one purchase, they're going to last a lifetime. So that's it for today. I hope this video was very helpful in not only just giving you a look at the product, but also some insights on successful seed starting, that importance of moving them along. And I hope you stick around on our channel. Something that I endeavor to do is to give a masterclass on seed starting and how I seed start and how it has helped reduce pests and disease issues in the garden. And it really starts at the beginning with the seed and nurturing it, spending all the energy and time to nurture the seedlings, because if you do that, when it goes in the garden, it's going to mostly take care of itself. You just have to come back in and make sure it's watered adequately and you place it in the right location with regard to sun and temperature. So yeah, that wraps it. Thanks for watching. And again, I hope this video is helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.